What's up, everybody? Coach Rob here. Yet another interview, third one in a row. How cool is that? Today is really cool. I know I say that about all of them, but they are. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them on. Steve Sims, also known as the head Kabbalist or chief Kabbalist of the really cool Instagram page, Carnivore Cabal. You're probably already following it. If not, you should. We kind of followed each other out there on the interwebs, and we shared information back and forth, did some DMs back and forth, found out that we're very like-minded about a lot of things. We got along great. We share the same ideology in so many ways. So today's conversation just kind of just naturally flowed. He wrote this phenomenal book, No Brainer Carnivore, which I highly recommend you pick up. It is just this super usable, down-to-earth, practical guide that anyone can read literally in a day or two and begin to apply it immediately. And it's kind of the blueprint that he used to make a significant change in his body composition, in his health, his longevity. So it's a phenomenal read, and it's free of all the BS. So again, I recommend that. Link will be in the show description. We talked about everything from the carnivore community, the carnivore diet. We talked about hard training, something that we both share a love for. And we went down a lot of different paths. And it just took on this sort of organic, just life of its own. And the cool thing about Steve is he's a retired law enforcement officer at a fairly high level. And I think it's his natural inclination to go from the guy being interviewed to the guy interviewing, because at some point in this interview, it kind of takes a turn where he just starts interviewing me almost. It's like I felt like I was being, under the bright interrogation light of this guy who has real skills in that department. And it turned into a lot of damn fun. So this is another one that even if you have to break it up, it's over an hour, but it's worth it. So definitely get all the way through, because as we got loose, as we got into the flow of this interview, this conversation, more than an interview, it really took a life of its own. We had a really, really good time, and I got a little fired up at the end. Shocker, right? So anyway, please enjoy my interview with Steve Sims of Carnivore Cabal, the Instagram page. And as usual, before we get into this, if you're a returning visitor and you have not yet subscribed, please do. I'm going to work my ass off to try to provide you good, entertaining, relevant content about training, about nutrition, about lifestyle, about all sorts of things. We've got so many things lined up that I want to talk about, and different directions I want to go and try to make it even more usable for everyone. So if you would do me the honor of hitting that subscribe button, hit the little thumbs up guide, notification bell, hell, leave a comment. It all goes so far in helping push the algorithms out there to get content like this out to other like-minded people on their feeds and their recommended watch list of videos. So anyway, thanks in advance for that. And without further ado, sit back and get some jerky and enjoy the interview that I had with Steve Sims of the book No Brainer Carnivore and the very cool Instagram page Carnivore Cabal. Enjoy. All right, everybody, as promised, I've got the man here. And to be honest with you, I have to confess that I'm really excited to have Steve on, because I consider him to be a friend, and we've been going back and forth for some time, and we're colleagues and peers, and I was super excited to finally have him on. And so I'm proud and honored to introduce Steve Sims. He is a retired federal agent, which is cool as shit. And he's also a lifelong nutrition and fitness enthusiast. And he's got a book that I have in my hot little hands right here called No Brainer Carnivore. He even mentions some really like narcissistic asshole in it that you may be familiar with. But it's a phenomenal book. It's excellent for anybody just getting started in that carnivore space. And we also have a unique love and interest in high intensity training. So I'm sure we'll touch on that today too, but I'll stop talking. Steve, it's great to finally have you on the damn show. How are you, brother?
I'm great, man, and feeling fantastic, which is what this is all about.
Well, if you
Getting to
weren't,
this.
we wouldn't be talking because,
I'm,
you did just be horse shit, right?
yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I'm going through a phase right now. I've been at this for 18 months, but I'm at a phase now where all of a sudden everything is freaking clicking.
Yeah.
It's been a few weeks of just maybe a couple months now where I can't even describe how great I'm feeling on a daily basis and energetic. When I listen to some of your podcasts, as your listeners know, I get motivated and I start saying, yeah, that's me. I'm feeling it too.
Hell yeah.
So it's great. I just want to thank you for having me on. And I know your listeners and viewers know who you are and what you're all about. But I want to tell you why it's important and exciting for me to talk to you. And that's because me specifically, that you are what I consider a triple threat. Okay. You've got three things going on that I think make you a complete unicorn and somebody that I've been dying to talk to on these topics because they've been just like you, 20, 30-year
Yeah.
topics of mine. I'm an experiment of one. I'm 58, about to turn 59. You're a few years behind me, but we're in the same basic era.
Yeah.
And some of this stuff that we'll touch on, I've been following as long as you have. You've, of course, put it to use and in a professional way and have all that experience to add to it. But I'll tell you why I think you're a triple threat. Number one, I encountered you in the carnivore space. Okay, so and I know that you're all in with the carnivore primal eating habits and all the benefits that come with that. A unique combination that you have, and that not a lot of guys have out there, is that you're able to take that space and also use all that experience that you have in dialing in bodybuilders
Yeah.
and all the hard truths that come with body recomposition, which I think is often not properly talked about in the carnivore space. It's all about what you can eat and how you can fix health problems, which is of course important. But there's only a few guys like you that are out there that are able to combine both because there's a lot of bodybuilding coaches out there and trainers,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
but they're not over here in our carnivore space.
Right.
There's a few of you guys like you and Bronson and that have that. On top of that, what makes you a triple threat, at least to me, is the HIT. And I'd like to chat and pick your brain a little bit on that, simply because I think HIT has always been a counterculture thing, just the way that carnivore is.
Sure.
I don't think it's ever taken off the way that it should have.
Correct.
I think obviously it's something that you've used and made use of, maybe not with all your clients, but certainly for yourself and with some of your clients. And I just think a little chat about the history of it and how we both came across it would be interesting for people to hear. And maybe we can get some folks to go out there and do a little Googling and pull up the old Arthur Jones bulletins and pick up a Mike Menser book or something.
Absolutely. I've had quite a few add those books to their libraries by my ramblings on YouTube and on the
Yep.
podcast.
And
So
I've got a reading list on my profile on Carnivore Cabal that has got some of them on there too, along with Ellington Darden, who I'm sure you're familiar
yep,
with,
of course. Yeah.
and Doug McGuff, another one
Sure. Yeah.
a doctor who did that. I'll tell you briefly how I got into it, and then I would love to hear how you got started and how you've managed to continue using it and stay with it all this
Hmm.
time because it is poo-pooed by a lot of there's still the majority of the bodybuilding world seems to be intent on sticking to high volume workouts.
Right.
And I heard in your HIT podcast about how talking about it, Dorian and those few folks out there that have done HIT, but it's still far from mainstream, as I guess you know.
Well, before we continue, and I'm going to let you just carry on right from
Sure,
there, I just want to remind the people watching this that HIT is high intensity training, not to be confused with high intensity interval training, which is something I
absolutely,
also do splash into my programming now. But
sure,
high intensity training, as we'll discuss, is very high intensity, hypertrophy driven training with considerably lower volume than most people are accustomed to or have been exposed to in the conventional world of strength training and fitness. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we got too deep, so I understood what we were talking about here. Because I'm
Yeah,
sure there's some out
absolutely.
there, like you alluded to, there's some out there that don't know what the hell we're talking about because,
Most,
yeah, most.
most,
So
most, but they get real curious real fast, as you mentioned in one of your podcasts, and that's what we want to, do is get people curious. But yeah, absolutely, it's that brief, you know, one set, quote unquote, to failure, but one working set, and
right,
with
right.
various amounts of presets. However, I heard you talk about yours today, but well, what I'll do is just tell you real quickly how I got into it because I had kind of an interesting experience, and then I'd love to hear how you got into it again and how
Sure.
you
Yeah.
used it. It was back in probably the late 90s when I'd always been interested in working out, obviously, and I have no idea how I ran across probably Mike Mentor first, the
Mm-hmm.
books. And I've always been an Ayn Rand fan as well. So when
Yeah.
I see some objectivism in there, and that's another topic that you'll just have to Google that if you're watching this and
Yep.
you are curious about that.
That's a
But
very long rabbit hole right there.
yeah, that rational thought, and again, that it's been with me like it has been with you probably. It doesn't matter if it's counterculture against the vibe. If our brains tell us that something makes sense, we go with it.
100%.
So after reading some Mike Mentor, I think I found out about Arthur Jones, who's really the goat or the OG, I guess, of HIT, the theory, and he's obviously the developer of Nautilus equipment, and
Mm-hmm.
was quite an interesting character, as I'm sure you know.
Very eccentric.
Um, and found some more books from Ellington Darden was a guy who studied under him and
Mm-hmm.
wrote some books and did some
Yep.
studies
Yep.
through university, PhD guy. And I was fortunate enough to run across a trainer in my area, it's Miami, named David Landau. And I don't know if you're familiar with David or not, but he is another countercultural fringe guy, but he's a serious HIT trainer. He's in his early 60s now and looks still to this day fantastic.
Yep.
And David had a relationship with Arthur Jones,
Oh, wow.
and he would go and visit him periodically, and had that connection that again, just almost makes you feel like you're one step away from touching greatness. So I ended up spending a year using David as my personal trainer, and I couldn't afford it. I went into debt to do it. He wasn't extremely expensive, but it was more than I could afford at that time. But it was so important to me. And what David would put me through is once every 7 days, a real high intensity workout on machines.
Mm-hmm.
But with David will stand there with a clipboard and a stopwatch and document everything, and again push you through that intensity level to where you get to failure, and using all those other things like supersets and uh, uh, rest pause, those kinds of things,
Right.
and just really dial you in specifically. And I did that for a year, and I made good progress. I had to eventually stop. Again, the finances were not allowing for it. But I got to tell you that year was priceless, and I have used it ever since. And this was the late 90s.
Great. Great.
And I learned enough about how to properly do it, which you really just can't quite get from a book. You have to kind of see it, at least on video,
Yep.
like some of Mike Mentor's videos with Marcus Reinhardt, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to see it or experience it under a trainer to really know how to do it properly. And like you said, it's not for everyone. Not everybody wants to go to those links to failure. So, in one way or another, throughout my law enforcement career, I've used HIT to basically get and stay as strong as possible, and it's worked wonders for me.
That's
And
fantastic.
this, my biggest issue was always with losing fat, and I just never focused on that enough. And I'll talk about that later when we talk about how I ended up in the carnivore space.
Right.
But I'd love to hear how you got started in HIT, and what your experience like that was, or how you discovered it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love talking about that stuff. First of all, I want everybody to know that we started talking through Instagram, and you see his Instagram handle on the screen right now. So make sure that when we're done, and I'll put the link in the description. You go follow Carnivore Cabal. That is a super cool Instagram page that I followed forever, and that's how we ended up getting in touch. But anyway, I just wanted to throw
Thank
that
you.
in there. It's
Appreciate that.
you that's kind of how one of the things that brought you into the space is that really cool Instagram page.
Listen, that's how I met my current romantic partner, Renee, who's carnivore.goddess. If any of you females out there would like to follow a
Outstanding.
female carnivore,
Yeah.
but she
Who doesn't
discovered
want to
that
follow
site
a
when I
carnivore
started it and
goddess?
yeah, she liked my sense of humor and happened to live in my same town, and we hooked up, and now we're a team. So Instagram has got its value.
It's the internet is like a gun. It can either be used to save you or it can be used to do irreparable harm. It's just all of what your intent is
Absolutely.
and how you handle it. But anyway,
Yeah.
high intensity training, man, I love the fact that I can sit down and talk about this because it doesn't always pop up. Everybody wants to know, what are you eating? What are you eating? And all about the controversies within the carnivore ketogenic world and all that stuff, which is all like it's like being in freaking high school these days. But anyway, I started training, and I've told the story before, but who doesn't want to hear it again? I started training back in 1993, and I was doing nothing. And like most things, it's always about a girl, as you just alluded to. I was with the love of my life. The love of my life dumped me, and I was going nowhere. I had dropped out of school. I was trying to make some money to see if I could then go back to school. I came this close to joining the Army because I thought I might want to be a Ranger, because why not kick the shit out of myself that way and actually have some purpose behind it? And so I was after a breakup, and I stumbled onto a competitive bodybuilder in this dead end job that I was working at the time just to make some money. And we were both fish out of water in this place, clearly. And he came up to me and said, "You don't look like you belong here." And I said, "Well, neither do you." And he asked me if I wanted to go to the gym. I said, "Sure." And I hadn't really worked out since high school, and went to the gym with him. And he proceeded, here's a competitive bodybuilder who just got me this fresh meat and just takes me through an absolutely grueling freaking workout. And then the next day and the next day, and every single day I felt like I'd been in a multi-collision car crash, that kind of a thing. But for some reason, I just liked that. I don't know if I was just trying to punish myself because I thought my life was miserable at the time or whatever, but that's how it started. And I'd always been this analytical, deep thinker, logical, rational, like we talked about. So I immediately became obsessed with the concept of this experiment of putting on muscularity and changing body composition. And I had to know how it all worked and how it came together. And then it became my own personal experiment. This bodybuilder told me, after I'd asked the question, what do I need to do to maximize muscularity and still be relatively lean and look great at the same time and be strong as shit? And he said, okay, you're going to have to lift weights until you feel like you're going to puke, to the point where the whites of your eyes go bloodshot from breaking blood vessels. And then you're going to have to eat like a shark nonstop all day long. You're going to have to sleep 10 hours a night, and you're going to have no social life whatsoever. And I said, sign me up. I'm in. And so I dove in. And so what do you start doing when you're a guy in your 20s getting into bodybuilding? Well, at that time, there was no internet. So I'm buying all of the magazines and I'm looking in the classifieds. And I thought, how can I learn more? And so I was going to seminars. I was driving places, knocking on doors, bothering people, being really annoying, training with people. And also during that time, the current Mr. Olympia was Dorian Yates, who to this day is still my favorite professional bodybuilder because of his blood and guts, high intensity, blood, sweat, grit, blue collar guy that like walked to a shithole gym in Birmingham, England in the snow. I just loved that whole persona. And when I started investigating him, he started talking about, as the Mr. Olympia, the current Mr. Olympia, he was changing his training style because he was working with this insane architect named Mike Mentzer, who was a former, star bodybuilder that competed against Arnold and should have beat Arnold in 80, by the way. That's another conversation.
Absolutely.
So I traveled down those rabbit holes and started digging into everything I could about high intensity training. So I became this seeker of knowledge and stumbled onto Mentzer and read everything I could get my hands on. Went down the Arthur Jones rabbit holes. Still a huge fan of Dorian at the time. He had just won his second Olympia. And that's when I've got obsessed. Well, I'm in the back of, I believe it was Flex magazine, might have been Muscle and Fitness at the time, or even Iron Man. I'm not sure. Could have been Iron Man because I think he wrote for Iron Man for a while. He did articles with him. But I
They were
see,
the closest ones that would have some HIT stuff in them, I
yeah,
think.
but there
Yeah.
was a classified ad. You remember those things in the back of magazines, the
Like Clarence
classified?
Bass
Yeah, you
books.
remember those? There was a little square that said that you could consult with Mike Menser, 3 consultations, and there was a phone number. That was it. So I called it, and I get Mike Menser on the damn phone, and he's so eccentric. You'd have to understand you have to research the guy if you're not familiar with him. He's very eccentric, very intelligent, had this love and obsession with philosophy, Ayn Rand, all this stuff. So it was so bizarre because here I am, this nobody kid in, North Carolina. This was before I went back to Florida and then came back. And I get on the phone with him and I basically said, Mr. Menser, I saw your ad and I wanted to talk to you about, and that's about all I got out of my mouth. And he just started talking. And it was just 20 minutes later, after him just going off weird, deep end tangents about God knows what, training, philosophy, life, I mean, death. I mean, I was just like, what the hell is happening here? He finally stopped and said, so what do you think? I'm like, I have no idea. I just want to get big and strong, and I like Dorian, and I don't know what's happening. So he's, even though it was super interesting, and then he sort of clarified, and he talked about the principles of high intensity training. He talked about the logic of high intensity training, why it is the finest protocol ever devised. He talked about Arthur Jones, and I just became mesmerized. I think we were on the phone for a little over an hour the first time.
And this was a free call at this point, right?
At the time, yeah. Well, and then when we get to the end, then he says, okay, he had this weird voice. He's like, well, I just need to get your credit card. The price for these 3 consultations is X number of dollars. And so I paid it. And he gave me the option. We started talking. This was on the second call. We started going into the specifics of what high intensity training would look like in real time. It was super interesting. And then he was like, if you could ever make it out here to Venice, we could do a session. So I said, hell yeah. And so I basically exhausted my savings. I didn't have much money at the time. I thought now that I'm into bodybuilding, I would love to visit Gold's Gym Venice and to meet with him. So I did that. And it was a very short meeting. We talked very briefly about, reminding what high intensity training was. We went through a very brief back workout, which was probably some of the 3 or 4 hardest sets I've ever done in my life. And, he just kept describing what real intensity is, what real failure is. Most people don't understand what failure is until they experience it. And I just remember we did a Nautilus pullover supersetted with a reverse grip pull down. That was the bulk of the workout. And we did a warm-up set. And then on the second set, I went to total failure on the pullovers to the point where I thought I was going to die. And then I immediately went to the reverse grip pull down, and he ushered me to the thing and told me to quit fucking around. And I got on the machine. I started the set of pull downs. I think I got to the area of 8 reps. And then I said, no more. I was dying. He said, you're going to get 1 effing more. And then, so I get it down to about here, and he holds it there. He's like, I'm not, and I do this with my clients today, and I learned it from him, admittedly. He said, I'm not going to help you. I'm just going to hold it there, and you're going to decide to pull this effing thing down. I don't care if it takes us all afternoon. So I got another inch or two, and I'm dying and screaming and yelling and convulsing, and cartoon sweats flying off my forehead, and a little deeper, and he holds it. But he's not helping. He's just holding it. I get a little deeper, and he's holding it a little deeper. And I finally get that last rep. And now he says, hold. And so I hold it for as long as I could, which seemed like an hour and a half. It was like probably 20 seconds. And then I did the slowest negative I could. And then he says, can you do another one? And I said, hell no. He's like, I believe you. That's what failure is. And he said, and I would know. I'm like, okay.
And there he's demonstrated the static hold.
Yeah. He said, if you have the opportunity to have a partner, he likes holding it in that position of momentary failure until you can wrap your head around it. Squeeze out a little more, squeeze out a little more. He said, I don't care if the last rep takes 60 seconds. Whatever it takes, you're going to make sure that you squeeze out every bit of effort under load, excuse me, that you possibly can. And then he wanted me to hold it there for a second, and I guess maybe experience that. And
Sure.
then the slowest, eccentric negative that I could possibly muster. And that was it. And then we went over and we did 2 sets of deadlifts. One that was probably about 60% of my max. And then he loaded up the bar. He said, "What's the most you've ever deadlifted?" And I told him, and I think he went like 10% beyond that. And he just wanted one damn rep. And I did one grueling rep. I tried to get another one. I got it maybe up 30% and couldn't get it anymore and dropped it. He said, "You're done." That was the workout. And then it was just chit chat and talk. And he shook my hand, and then I walked around Gold's Venice and, gawked at all the bodybuilding superstars that
What
happened to be
an
there at the
amazing
time.
experience.
And
I
yeah,
forgot. I think I did remember running across something where you said you actually had, I knew you had talked to him, but that's a life-changing experience right there. You've already explained why you stuck with it, because after going through
yeah,
that experience, I'm sure it was,
it was cool. It was super cool. And again, I'm not going to lie. He was a very unusual cat. Um, Funny, but bizarre. Super
as
intelligent.
was Arthur Jones.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why I think they probably got along so well, even though there were times they didn't get along so well from some of the stories I've heard. But
Yes.
I think
Yes.
they kind of tolerated each other's eccentricities.
Hmm.
But it turned out to be a cool thing. And to be totally honest, after that experience, I obviously went back home and continued to train, and still a big fan of the sport and dug into every aspect I could. And I have to be honest, reading a lot of the Dorian Yates stuff at the time, I liked his approach of a couple of feeder sets. That's what he called it. That's where I got the term. And then you go into that last all out set to failure. And for me, I think the couple of feeder sets is important because I have to wrap my head around the moment. And I think doing a couple tough sets, not to failure, but just tough, kind of gets your head in the game. It gets your muscles warm. It takes you across that threshold, and mentally prepares you, and on a physiological level too, by getting blood in the muscle and lubricating the joints. I can really get that third set to all out failure much more effectively and efficiently if I do a couple of decent sets before that. And I really think it is just a mindset thing more than anything for me. And
Sure.
especially now at my age, I'll be 55 in November. I need a couple of sets to get my joints loose, to get into the flow, just to get into the vibe of the workout. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that's just the way I like to do it. And for me, the low volume isn't necessarily number of sets, but it's more about just time and intensity. So, like, I work out with 3 other guys, and we never train longer than 40 minutes. I mean, you can think 4 dudes training, for muscle growth, strength, the preservation and sustainability of lean mass. 4 guys training together, you'd think it would take an hour and a half, but we blast that shit out. And basically, the way we do it is, if it's my set, I do it to total failure, or I do the feeder set. And when I get that last set, it's total failure. Then the next guy goes, then the next guy goes, then the next guy goes. And as far as we're concerned, that's about the adequate amount of rest. And then we move on to the next movement. But like we did back this Monday, we did 3 exercises. That was it. But man, it was all out. It was all
Yeah.
freaking out. Well, we started just with the reverse grip pull down. We did 2 feeder sets, and then a set to all out freaking grueling failure with that static hold. And then, of course, since I have workout partners, we will help with force reps. We'll help with negatives and things like that. And then after the pull down, we went to a chest supported old school barbell row, which I really love. And we did the same thing, 2 feeder sets, and then 1 set until where it was absolutely impossible to get it up any higher and tap my chest. And then we ended with pull downs or pull over, excuse me, on that day, just on a cable machine, 2 sets, and then one to like a stupidly heavy weight that we barely got 4 or 5 reps with. We were done. That was it. And we were freaking fried. We were cooked. And
There's
that,
a quick question for you. There's one item that I think I don't hear about a lot outside of the HIT community, and that is that the emphasis on negatives and how important the
oh,
negatives
it's
are. Do you
huge.
ascribe to that? That I think Menser used to
Yeah.
say that it was, that was your that was a much stronger part of your
Oh,
movement
absolutely.
than
Well,
the
it's simple. I,
positive.
I explain this to nearly every client that I work with on my gym floor. One of the first things that I try to get in their head is, listen, here's the deal. Let's just take a bench press, for example, even though I don't bench press a lot. If you can press hypothetically 100 pounds, then you could probably hold 150 pounds static. And if you can
Static
hold
is the second
150,
level. Yeah.
if you can hold 150 pounds, then you can probably lower under control 200 pounds. So clearly you're strongest in the eccentric or the lowering of the weight. So you need to try to maximize that eccentric phase of the lift, and you can incorporate some high intensity techniques to do that. And if you have the luxury of having training partners, which I do, then there will be times where they will accentuate the negative. So like on a pressing movement, if I am just failing on that pressing of the weight, like on a Smith machine, say, and I finally get it locked out and I'm just freaking dying, I'll hold it there for a second. And then my partners know I'm going to have a little left on that negative. I don't just let it drop. So these assholes are going to push on the damn thing. And so they're pushing on it, and I'm resisting against them with everything I have on this final negative of this final rep. And then when I rack that weight, I'm freaking dead, dude, just gone. So we're taking advantage of that eccentric phase of the lift where you are always the most strong. That's where you're the strongest. And then you stand to gain the most breakdown of tissue during that phase of the lift, maximizing the growth opportunity that you have, that you've stimulated, provided you feed the muscle and give it adequate time to recover.
I heard you this morning on that podcast talking about the whole thing about digging the hole and then filling the hole up. I think that was a Mentor thing I read about.
That was a Mentor thing, and he explained that to me, and I've heard others explain the same thing. So, and this is another reason why people say, how come you don't do push pull legs? I'm like, because you can call it a bro split if you want. I call it a pro split to differentiate that, because it's not a bro split like we're just some dumb meathead just narcissistically working a certain muscle group so we can pose in the mirror. The point is when I did that back workout that I just mentioned on Monday, then it's all about the recovery process. So you not only compensate, which is just the recovery back to baseline that you started with, but now it's overcompensation, which is the stimulation of new growth based on a defense mechanism in the body. By taking that set to all out failure to the point where you just cannot do another rep, that sends a signal as a defense mechanism that says, I don't know what the hell Rob just did here, but it was super freaking difficult to the point of impossible. So in the event he ever does that shit again, we'd better, as a defense mechanism, add some new muscle onto that frame in case,
you just nailed it. That's the exact description that I give people when I talk about the importance of that last rep or two, and that's really where the work is done. Because if you just go to what you're capable of, your body says, okay, you did a little bit of damage, we'll build you right back to where we were, and we can keep on doing this week in and week out.
No reason to change.
You've got to send your body that signal. Whoa, that wasn't enough. We failed.
Yep.
We've got to rebuild, and we got to rebuild a little bit stronger because we did not have enough. And I know that sounds silly to think your body's having these thoughts. Well, it is.
I mean, it's like a suntan. You can, if I sit under 100-watt light bulb, I can sit behind it for 10 hours. I'm not going to change the pigment of my skin. Right. However, if I sit in August south of the equator, bright sunlight for 6 hours, I'm going to fry, right? Yeah. So it's about finding the precise amount required to stimulate the adaptive response. Yeah. So it's the same thing with strength training. And to really put a fine point on it, and I'll let you take it wherever you want to take it, because I think this will kind of put emphasis on this. For nearly 30 years of doing high intensity training, I've asked people, listen, I just described this workout, this back workout that I did. So when I took this third set after a couple feeder sets to absolute 100% all out failure with the impossibility of doing another rep, and I'm done, why would I do another set at this point? Explain to me. Just walk me through. Tell me where I'm wrong here. Why would I do another one? Has growth not been stimulated? Have I not completely torn down the tissue? And if I were to do this fourth set that you seem to think I need to do, all I'm doing at that point is creating a deeper inroad to recovery. I'm
Sure.
lengthening the time that it might take to recover from that breakdown of tissue and regrow and overcompensate.
Yeah.
So you walk away and let it grow.
The standard thing of 3 sets of 8 to 10 is it becomes extended cardio. You
Exactly.
know,
There's no point
it's
to
not
it. That's
strength training.
why for me, it's the first set is mental. The second set is somewhat physiological, getting blood into the muscle, lubricating the joints, getting into that flow. And then when I feel like I have that proper mind body connection ready to go and I'm in the flow, because especially these days, I'm nonstop from 4:30 in the morning until 11 o'clock. And it's all about business and work and training and clients and messages and online clients. And what the hell am I going to talk about on YouTube today? And all this kind of shit. And then it's time. I've got 1 hour from 11 to 12 to train and just break away from the monotony and the noise of everything and the distractions of life. So going through those first couple of sets just sort of sets the tone for me. I turn off the damn phone. I've set everything aside. I get into that flow. And then when I do hit that third all out set to failure, it is on. And then, like the next movement, we may not have to do 2 feeder sets. If I'm so freaking like highly motivated,
There you
psyched
go.
up in the
Yeah.
flow, then I might just do one to get a
Right.
feel of
Right.
that movement, get that in
Right.
my head. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Right.
then do that all out set to failure then. And then we move on to the next damn thing. So the other cool thing about that is, you may be able to, like on a back day, I can do 3, maybe 4 movements, really targeting all the muscles of the back and the traps. And it's only going to take us about 40 minutes and then I'm done and I'm absolutely freaking baked. And I know that at least at my age, now we're not going to build a ton of muscle at our ages. So my goal is to sustain as much that I've built over the years as I
Yes.
possibly can.
Right.
And I even know now that my goals have changed since I'm not competing anymore. I'm training for longevity. I'm training for health. I'm training for performance. I want to be able to move with intention with everything that I do. So even though, my goal is to be 10 to 12% body fat and muscular and strong and fit, at these days, I'm not trying to sustain a 230-pound frame because I know that's not going to be completely beneficial for what my goals are now. But I still want to train very intensely 3 or 4 days a week to try to maintain as much lean mass as I can while I'm also now building for performance, longevity, health, and everything that goes with it to live a long, functional life.
That is an excellent segue into the one little idea I wanted to bounce off of you regarding HIT. And I wanted to see if you agree with me, and I think you probably will. And that is that the way that you experienced it with Mike, and the way that you did it when you were training to absolutely build the blood and guts, that mindset is. I mean, I don't think it can be matched. However, I think that there's another level that I think, again, as you've mentioned before, that scares a lot of people off.
Right.
And I think a lot of the stuff I've done, and we'll talk briefly, before we're done about my, the carnivore world as well. I think a lot about the psychology of this stuff and
Sure.
basically because I've had to work through these issues myself. That, and in my career, I had a job where I had to do a lot of intel analysis, and I had to figure out how people that didn't want me to know how they were thinking were thinking.
Right.
And I think that one of the other beauties of HIT is that there is actually a level where you can use these concepts that's not quite up there. And again, it's like what you just described. We're in a different, I'm 58 now. I know that there are some limitations as to what kind, I don't have the genetics. I have a tall, thin frame but I want to have and keep as much muscle as I can.
Sure.
One of the beauties, I believe, in using these HIT concepts is that you can go in and machines are great for it, in my opinion,
Oh
because
yeah,
without a
absolutely.
spotter,
100%.
you
Yeah.
can push yourself to failure on a lot of machines. You can go into the machine section where all the muscle heads are in the weight room, and using the dumbbells and everything, because free weights are better, and you can push yourself to failure with much less risk of injury.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point where I'll do something like I'm doing a full body HIT three times a week now, but on the third day, I'll go in and I will lower the weight and I will do more reps, but I'll still use the same slow cadence and I will still take myself to failure and I will still try to do a static hold at the end and extreme negatives and all that. And yet, believe it or not, because at this point I'm doing 15 to 20 reps, I'm having more fun.
Yeah.
It feels
Yeah.
different than on those other 2 days when I'm pushing harder on the heavy weights and I feel like I'm on on the edge of popping something or bursting something.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of folks, besides the efficiency, again, you're not sitting there. I see, you've seen people sit in the gym and do. I'm sometimes halfway through my workout when one guy's been sitting on one machine the whole time.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I would like to have more people that might be a little scared off or not have the need, as you said, to doing it to the level that you did when competing and the way those guys did it, but still use those concepts and those techniques to figure out how good. And that's why I did a real brief summary in my book, as you said. And of course, you'll never know it until you really go work under somebody like you, even for a couple of workouts and all that. But I hope you'll agree that I think that there is a broader audience for it than just the blood and guts,
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
beasts.
100%. And I think if you talk about safety of training as we age, I think it's volume that is injuring people more than intensity.
Sure.
If I do one set to absolute momentary muscular failure on a Smith machine or a seated chest press, that's going to give far less wear and tear on my joints and ligaments and tendons than if I did 5 or 6 sets to 60% of my max, especially as we age. And I'm not the first to suggest this. And I definitely think as we age, a high intensity protocol could be extremely wise in terms of just the preservation of joint health and staying free from injury and 100%. And when you talk about some of the higher rep ranges or whatever, I'm a big fan of big rest pause sets. And it's nothing you're going to see in Mentzer's program. It's nothing
Right.
you're going to see in an Arthur Jones program, but there are times when I will say, okay, I'm going to do this triceps press down and I'm going to do it for 100 damn reps.
Wow.
And I'm going to choose a weight that gets me to maybe 15 or 20.
Wow.
Absolutely. I cannot do another one. So I'll do 15 or 20 reps. And then when I cannot move that rope down another inch, I'll count to 10. And then
That's
10,
a monster set to failure is what you're talking about.
then 10 is the number. And no matter how recovered I am at 10, I'm going to go after it again. I may get another 12 or 13 reps, and then I'd take another 10 breaths. Then I go after it again, then another 10 breaths. So it's just this one grueling giant set. But talk about intensity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unreal. And, there are tricep days where it'll be, okay, 2 sets of parallel bar dips to total failure. And then I'm going to go do tricep rope press downs or tricep straight bar press downs, whatever, in a rest pause set to 100, and it may take 6 or 7 trips through the course of that 100 reps to get there. But the intensity is just off the chain because I don't care who you are. Everyone's going to have a tendency to stop on a predetermined number. It just gets stuck in our head.
Especially if you're by yourself.
Especially if you're by yourself. So we might get stuck on, you might get to 15 and then stop when we could have done 17. And I'll tell my clients all the time, and I'm one of the few trainers that I know that does this almost exclusively. My clients in the gym know this. I will say as many as you can with good form. And then I'll remind them, don't do 8 if you can do 9. Don't do 9 if you can do 10. And I keep reminding them of that because if left to their own devices, they'll stop at 8, 10, 12, 15, 20. They always have those numbers. So that's why I like the to break that monotony, that psychological monotony of doing a rest pause set, because I'll say, I want you to go until you cannot do another one. And sometimes I won't tell them we're doing 100 rest pause set. I'll say, we're going to do press downs. So I set the weight knowing what they can handle because I work with them. And I'll say, go until you cannot do another one no matter what. And let's say they get to 11. I said, okay, good. We got a good start. We're doing 100. They're like, shit. So it's like, okay, now do as many more as you can. And I'm keeping track. And they go from 11 to maybe 19, another odd number. They're just gone. Okay, you rest, you count to 10. I'll keep track of your reps. And then sometimes I won't even tell them where they're at. I'll just, don't even worry about the number. You just focus on the intensity and get through as many as you can and then rack it for 10 breaths. And then we do that.
if you're going to do HIT on your own, you do have to ramp up the level of self motivation,
You
because
absolutely do.
anybody can go do 3 sets of 8 or 3 sets of 10 or whatever. But to get in there with that mindset of, look, I have to, it's not going to work if I don't push myself during this last couple of reps. If I don't put this extra effort in at the end,
Right. Right.
it's not going to work. And you can't
Yeah.
just walk through it.
100%. And again, intensity to me, and again, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. There are things that just work for me. And then I try to apply these things with my clients. And sometimes I have to, take a left or take a right, depending on who they are and what works best for them. But for
Sure.
me, when we define intensity, Menser always defined intensity by the least amount of time possible and the greatest amount of effort.
Right.
For me, intensity doesn't necessarily have to be reps, but it might just be literally that time under tension.
Sure.
So even though I'm doing 100 rep rest pause set, that workout is still only going to last for one individual 20 minutes. And then they're done. They're gone.
Right.
But they are absolutely freaking cooked. And then they walk away from it and they let it grow. And back to a previous point that I was trying to make with the pro split over the push-pull leg. Now, if you like push-pull legs, let's do that all day long. I don't care. If that's working for you and you dig that, I'm good with that. But for me, I want to destroy my back on Monday and give it ample rest until I hit it again next Monday and not until I feel fully recovered. Because if you really look at the data, you're not going to lose muscle over the course of 7 days. It's just not going to happen. So for people to say, oh, I don't want to lose my gains by waiting another week, that's not the way the body works.
That's some bro science right there.
You'd have to go weeks before you would worry about any, degradation of tissue. And if you're feeding it enough, that's not even going to happen then. Right. But what can happen is if you hit that muscle too soon, if you've trained very intensely, is, as we discussed, you can create that inroad to recovery. You haven't filled up to the dirt yet, not even the ground level, let alone packing on top. You're just short-circuiting the growth mechanism, right, and you're giving yourself diminishing returns. Right. So that's the way I like to train like that. And even to this day, this would make Menser roll over in his grave. But because of what my goals are right now at my age, I will do a high-intensity training, brief, super high intense to total failure, hypertrophy workout at 11. And then at 3:00 in the afternoon, I'll put a 65-pound pack on my back and grab a 60-pound sandbag and go do some insane hit workout because my goals have changed. Now, when I was bodybuilding, I never would have done that. But now that my goals have changed, I want to maintain as much muscularity as I possibly can at my age. I also want to have some cardiovascular conditioning for my health. And I want to be able to move with intention and intensely if needed. In other words, handle anything that might cross my path, which is a lot of what my apocalypse challenge is going to be covering coming up. Right. But that's the way I approach it now. And that works well for me. It gets me super fit. I feel great. And then I gauge everything with myself as I do with my clients on performance. Hey, how are you sleeping? Do you fall asleep fairly quickly? Do you sleep restfully? Do you wake up feeling invigorated and ready to go? Are you having any energy lulls through the day? How is your performance in the gym? Are you crushing your workouts? Do you have the, do you have the desire to go do 35 minutes of cardio later in the day? If I get lots of no's to those questions, then I know you're either undernourished, you're overtrained, something is not right in the protocol.
That's that checklist that I've been going through that all of a sudden I've been feeling these great things. And I'm like, wait a minute, where did this come from?
Absolutely.
How, in all honesty, one of the reasons I'm looking forward to hearing about the Apocalypse Challenge is even with your last one, I've never been drawn to those things. And I'll tell you why. A little bit of it is self-serving, but I had a very interesting career. I did a lot of cool stuff. I'm retired now. I don't have to work. I feel like I've really reached a level of fitness and body composition that I'm very happy with. So the need for a challenge hasn't been there. But guess what? I'm starting to feel so good that I'm waking up every day going, gee, I kind of would maybe like to do something every day that's a little challenging. The physical condition is driving me to it rather than the mental condition. It's saying, but you can do this stuff now. Why not if you can do it? You got the time. Yep. You're feeling great. Why not go do something with that?
100%. 100%.
So
I was
it's
telling a
such a
client.
big part of this, and I think I'd like to, if maybe this is again where your bodybuilding combined with I'd like to talk a little bit about carnivore and some of the psychological aspects that I think are being uh, misrepresented and overlooked in the carnivore community, and that I think that you could shed some light on because of the fact that you've had to deal so much with body recomposition.
Right.
And so moving to that topic, if you're okay with that,
Absolutely.
I should give a little history for a lot of your listeners who don't know, where the book came from and where the account came from. But basically, I had, as you mentioned, touched on, I was a federal agent. I was a special agent with the Homeland Security Investigations, which is the investigative arm of ICE,
Hmm.
for 23 years. And the last 8 years of that, I was assigned full time to the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Wow.
So I spent my last 8 years doing counterterrorism work. Um, During that last 4 or 5 years or so, I continued to put on some weight. I was working out. I was big and pretty bulky. I wanted to be leaner, but it wasn't my emphasis. But bear in mind, this last 5 years, we're mandatory retirement at the age of 57. So my last 5 years is me in my 50s, and I was starting to feel it. It was always kind of good to have that extra weight for law enforcement purposes, but you hit your 50s, and that mobility thing starts to
Yeah.
rear its ugly head. So I ran across like Sean Baker who was the what I call the original gangster of
Yeah.
Carnivore,
Yeah. The OG Sean
following him,
Baker.
and I dabbled for years with a little, do it for a couple of days, and the meat aversion would kick in, and I mean a steak would taste great the first day, but then by the third day it was like, no, I want some chips, or I want some rice, or
Yeah.
whatever. That carb addiction that you've talked about quite a bit. So basically what happened was I went along that way until I retired. I retired, spent about 6 months kind of getting my life in order, trying to organize the next chapter. And I said, you know what? I need to buckle down and give this thing a real shot. And I did that. And in 5 or 6 months, I dropped 50 pounds of fat without much pain and without much effort.
Great.
Right at the beginning of that, maybe a month into it, is when I started the Carnivore Instagram account. And what I did that with that in mind is, again, to stand out from the crowd a little bit and just kind of pull together a bunch of counterculture stuff. If you look up the definition of a cabal, for people that wonder why it has this weird name, it's a kind of conspiracy theory, a group of people trying to influence
Sure. Yeah.
the greater society. And I think that's kind of what we're doing in a way. I did that to have fun with it and to have some motivation, and but had some real personal success where I, dropped this weight, started feeling better. And I did it in a very sloppy way. It was very imperfect, perfectly imperfect, as I like to talk about. But it worked great. In the meantime, I met my current partner, Renee, and she'd already had a good amount of success, kind of stumbled upon it. She'd started a carnivore account literally at the same time that I started mine. And that's how we met. Um, but here's what we observed as we pretty much had been in it for a good amount of time, was that there were a lot of experts out there. And as you've seen this thing grow and explode in the last couple of years, everybody's an influencer now.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to be a coach. I really hate for the credibility of the overall community to be affected, for people like you, like Coach Bronson, by people that are just parroting back what they've heard from these so-called experts. And the other thing that I noticed was that we were being told over and over what not to do. And it was getting to the point where it was extreme. I mean, and not that these weren't all great suggestions, even to the lifestyle things like don't use nonstick pans, don't use plastic. But at every turn, when you step into this world, it ends up being very almost vegan-like,
Yeah.
in that it's don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. and you can't have this, and you're not a true carnivore if you don't, you've touched on this, but if you drink coffee, you're not a true carnivore. If you put Tabasco on your food, that's plant matter. You're not a true carnivore. All this kind of stuff going on. And, Renee and I are sitting across the table having our coffee in the morning going, well, wait a minute. We did all this stuff. And look at where we ended up.
Yeah.
This is not true. You can do some of this stuff. And we combine
Absolutely.
that with the idea of, look, it's hard to make this change. It took me 5 years to make it. She's a recovering vegetarian vegan for many more years than she's been a carnivore. She'll
Wow.
never go back. But I'm like, you're asking people to make a huge change. And people may not be retired with time on their hands. They may have lives and families and things. This is a challenge. So just like the examples you've given, let somebody have their coffee in the morning
Yeah.
while they're doing this. And
100%.
the other thing that's pretty amazing about carnivore is that the longer that you're on it, all that cleaning up kind of happens on its own.
Mm-hmm.
You start to get a palate for things without spices. You get, I found that it cleans itself up. You don't have to do it at day one, and you can lose weight and you can feel better while doing this. So to make a short story long, those sessions that we had and the frustration that we had combined with, the trolling that people are seeing that you've described, we were like, no, there's another way you can do this. And we need to stop scaring people off. We need to get them into the tent, as I like to say. And I said, you know what? I'm not a content creator. I'm not going to sit and make videos day in and day out about this stuff. I said, but I have something I have to get out.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to write down this sloppy plan that I used, and I'm going to write it to the best of my ability. And I am going to get people in here started under the tent. And when they start getting ready to take it to the next level, then they need to come find people like you, Coach Bronson, other folks like that. But my God, let's get as many people in here as we can.
Right. 100%.
So that's where, again, I'm thinking of the psychology. Why are we beating these people down? Let's get them in, get them motivated. Some success brings you motivation. You get better, you get cleaner, like anything else. And so I wrote the book, put it out there, and all I do is self-promote it. And it's coming up on about 200 copies sold, and I'm getting some nice feedback that it works for a lot of folks. And it's written for grown-ups, and it's written for people that have already accepted the premise that this is a good thing to do.
Okay.
I don't put any expert medical stuff in there. There's quite a disclaimer in there about that. I'm going to show you, without much thought, how to get started,
Mm-hmm.
what'll work, guaranteed to work, guaranteed.
Yep.
You do these things and it's guaranteed to work as long as you're not a lunatic about it. And then you can move on and you can go dig up all the minutia that you want, or you can just live with it for life the way that we do.
Right. Yep.
All that. So I got that out. That's what's going on now. But here's where I want to hit a couple of things that you've been talking about recently, and that I think I have a little something to add, and at least want to get your feedback on it because of your background with the bodybuilding thing. And these are three concepts that kind of go together, and we can finish off after we're done with these if you'd like. But they're so important to me that I wanted to get your feedback on them. First and foremost, and I just did a short video. I'm doing little 5-minute videos now on a YouTube channel I've just started, and I don't, again, just quickies. But I'm a little bothered, and again, going from a psychological aspect, from the advice that a lot of influencers and trainers out there are telling folks when they say to ignore the scale. And I'll give you my reason for that. I understand why they're doing it. I understand that the scale is not the end all and be all, and that we know that weight goes up and down and fluctuates, and it comes, weight loss or weight gain comes in spurts, fits in spurts. But what's being subtly, I think, put out there by telling somebody to not pay attention to the scale is this idea that body recompensation happens on a one-to-one basis. Mm-hmm. So if somebody like myself was 250 pounds, I would love to have stayed 250 pounds and lost 50 pounds of fat. But what is the likelihood of me at 55 replacing 50 pounds of fat with 50 pounds of muscle?
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Okay. Now, First off, as you know, I mean, the conventional wisdom was always you're either going to be bulking or you're going to be cutting.
Mhm.
I do believe that there is a potential in some cases with with this kind of a diet, things to do a little bit of simultaneous recompensation. But come on, if I have 50 pounds of fat to lose, I'll be doing good if I hold on to or gain a couple pounds of muscle in that 5 or 6 months it takes me. Would you agree?
100%. I tell people not to get obsessed with the scale
Right.
because I have clients. Now, you have to understand, and I think most people that watch this, who have the patience to watch this show of mine, I still can't believe they
Mhm.
do, would understand that this has been an evolution. The nutritional evolution for me has always happened while I was in the trenches training people. I have been training human beings every single freaking day for nearly 30 years. And over the course of that time, I learned and I evolved and I adapted and I learned and I involved and I experimented. You talk about a clinician. I mean, I've been working with people and trying these things. And of course, inevitably, they want to try what I'm doing because I start getting results and I express
Right.
my results and then we tweak it for them. So with the scale, first of all, yes, you can build muscle and lose fat initially for a short period of time, especially if you're untrained. Like if you haven't been lifting weights, it's new to you.
Right.
When you first jump in there, like when I first jumped in with this bodybuilder that I'd mentioned, I was eating just a standard bodybuilding diet, high protein,
You
high
were
carb, low
you were
fat.
young, presumably
I
too, though,
was
right?
young, I was in my 20s, and I started putting on muscle really fast. And I and everybody around me noticed that I'm just a hyper responder. I had the
Right.
genetics to build muscle,
Right.
which was great.
Right.
But then, so for the first year, I went from about 175 pounds. I got to 205 inside the first year. It was all muscle, and that was great. And then, but it didn't take me long to where my body figured out what the hell I was doing and I leveled off. So at that point, then you kind of have to make a call. Where do I want to be? Do I want to be slightly above my effective energy baseline to a point where I can add on, you create a better, more anabolic environment to build muscle? Or do I want to
Right.
maintain where I'm at? Or do I want to cut and lose
Get
body
leaner.
fat and with the inevitable potential loss of muscle mass that you have to put up with? It's just the way the body works. So I think you do have to kind of pick your goal and act accordingly. So with that said, as far as the scale goes, I just tell my clients not to get obsessed with it because it's this human nature thing with most people in this culture to get on that damn thing every single day. And that's when it can become a psychological disadvantage for you. And because I fluctuate 4 to 6 pounds a day from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed.
Right.
Well, clearly, that's not body fat. That's blood volume. That's fluid. That is
Correct.
food that might still be, undigested.
Right.
So many things. It could be dependent on certain cortisol secretions and stress, and so many things are involved there. So I tell my clients, listen, I'm going to put a check-in on your calendar, and you'll weigh on those days, and you'll also do progress pics because that's the true
Sure.
indication of
Right.
somebody's results. But so for instance, I think a good idea is if you definitely want to keep weighing and that keeps you motivated, I have no issue with that. But do this. Do it on Saturday morning, right when you get out of bed, after you've went to the bathroom, completely naked on the same scale in the same
Right.
environment every
Right.
single Saturday or every
And
single Friday or whatever the case may be. Because that's going to be the closest you're going to get to that being a true representation of body composition changes or fat losses and things like that. But if you're stepping on that damn thing every single day, or some of my clients were doing like 2, 3 times a day and then getting discouraged, and then you have to figure in the third grade math problem that I always have to explain to people. Listen, you've just started training hard for the first time in years. I'm putting you through some grueling workouts. It's very structured. I'm on this shit. I'm designing everything. I'm pushing you to do it. So if you put on 3 pounds of lean, sexy, gorgeous freaking muscle and you lose 3 pounds of obscene globby fat, which is a lot by volume, what's the scale going to say? Big fat goose
right.
egg. And even though you've made a dramatic change in your body and your appearance and your composition, all you're focused on is, well, shit, I haven't lost a pound. You know how many times, this is so mind numbing, I've had a client come to me in the early stages until I fix this psychological issue. They'll say, I just don't understand. I've lost 2 dress sizes. I feel better. I'm looking better, but I haven't lost a damn pound. I'm going to be like, I want you to walk through that statement again slowly and think about what you're telling me. And,
Yep.
you know, are you seeing what I'm talking about here? How that's cuckoo talk.
Well,
Okay.
again, we're talking about the psychology from
The
both angles.
psychology. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't have a problem with somebody stepping on a scale, but do it in a structured way and give yourself some time, and make sure the environment that you create to do that check-in is
I,
consistent each time. And then whatever, that's good. I mean, I've had some morbidly obese clients that scale was everything for both of us. You know, it was like massive moral victories for these people because they couldn't train super hard. They couldn't be on their feet for super long. They couldn't go out and do an hour of cardio and on the hills. And, you know, it was just a little bit of movement, baby steps. We had to put huge emphasis on their nutrition, and those little scale victories. Everybody talks about, oh, non-scale victory. Those are great. But some of those
mhm.
scale victories for some of these completely metabolically broken people are
It's a
huge.
motivator, sure.
It's a
It's
huge
a
motivator.
motivator. It's a sign of some progress.
So that's just the
I
way I look
found
at it.
I found it very useful to find an app that has a moving average, because again, you've got these fluctuations that with the water weight, and a moving average is a little bit less painful to look at because
Right.
you might see a better progression. I guess again, the one thing that I'm concerned about, because people hear what they want to hear.
Sure. Sure.
And there's a lot of folks out there. And again, you're talking about people that are focused and are coming to see you and are training and all that kind of thing. I'm worried about the folks that are out there that all they hear is, don't worry about the scale. And I think when you get down to your more closer to your ideal body weight, you're going to be much closer to doing a 1-to-1 recompensation, like you described, 3 pounds of this versus 3 pounds of that. But when you've got 30, 40, 50 pounds of fat to lose,
Sure. Yeah,
that
absolutely.
scale is going to have to come down
100%.
because it's not going to be replaced with 30, 40, 50 pounds of muscle.
It goes
So
back
I'm
to,
just afraid that people take that message too far and they don't have somebody guiding them, and they just go, okay, I don't have to pay attention to the scale.
I think the majority of people don't even listen to that advice because that's how stuck to the scale most of us are. So
Yeah, that's probably true.
all I try to do is just break up the frequency of them stepping on that thing, because people get obsessed with that, and it because they're stepping on it every single day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. That's where you can run into a problem. It can be
Of
it can be a
course.
demotivator rather than if
Yes.
you do it in a structure. And that's what coaching is.
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? I want you to do this on this day under these specific circumstances. Hey, I just coached you. That's another small segment of what we do. And I just, if you're one of my clients in my gold package, I just added Zoom check-ins. Finally, I was able to clear enough of my schedule where I could do that. And it's been so valuable, so cool that now I'm doing one-off consultations that people can purchase and meet with me for an hour and a half.
That's
And
awesome.
I thought they were going to be cool, but I didn't even realize how monumentally valuable talking to someone can be. It's just everything. So when people schedule these consultations with me, you can give me all the background information on paper that you want. You can type out as much as you want. But once I have that one-on-one conversation where I can really pry into their psychology, their experiences, their challenges, all of these aspects, wound up into this tight ball of stress and what's worked and what hasn't worked, we can sort of lightly walk through this minefield and sort of clear away those distractions and start to lay a blueprint that makes logical, rational sense. Here we are again. And then their demeanor from the time we log on to the time we log off changes completely. Human beings are tribal. We want to interact with each other. We need to express things. Sometimes I can sit there like what we're doing now and say 15 words over the course of an hour and a half and just let them talk and express. And I can chime in a little here, chime in a little there, move them in the right
It works
direction.
good with your spouse or girlfriend too.
Exactly. Well, that's I could write a book on that real quick. But no, I mean, it's once again, I'm not going to tell you I know everything. I'm not. My whole stance has always, the reason I think some people like my channel, support what I do, because if I had to say the number one compliment that I get from people just out there that are watching is, hey, you seem real. You seem no bullshit. And that's
Absolutely.
all I ever wanted. And I'm not going to tell you I'm always right. I will make changes in my ideology when I see fit to. I will admit when I'm wrong when those times happen. And I'm not going to tell you I have all the answers, but damn it, you and I are going to roll our freaking sleeves up and we're going to go into war together and we're going to figure the shit out one on one.
Yep.
And that's why I love this whole coaching medium and I love
Well,
meeting with people.
I got another good coaching topic for you then too, because you started it. You did a great job starting it with Bart K,
Mhm.
and then you and Coach Bronson took it in the direction where I wanted to hear it go, and it needs to go just a millimeter farther to answer my question,
Okay.
and that is the whole calories and tracking topic.
Oh,
And I think
yeah.
you're such a perfect person to answer this because I'm sure that you've spent a big part of your career coaching people. I mean, you've had to with bodybuilders, you've had to track calories and macros and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
We're now certainly so just to make it as quick and simple as possible, I'm 100% on board with the whole argument that calories are very inaccurate. There is the heat thing, that whole thing. Um, they're not an accurate way of tracking what you're taking into your body. I think Sean Baker did a great short video on this where he said, it's point out all the benefits, all of the metabolism things, the hormonal things that make this diet different, and where calories can be what we would traditionally call calories could be quite a bit different, and you could still, you could eat 500 more calories, quote unquote, and still have results. The problem, the question that I have is this. Like Bart goes into this thing about, okay, the best way then, if you're not going to track calories, is to use satiety,
Mhm.
right? And eat what you want to do. The issue that I have with that is that there are a lot of us, and I'm a perfect example, that we're pigs. Okay. Psychologically, I'm still that guy that was taught to clean his plate. And whatever I'm served, whether it's great big steak or whether it's I'm gonna have a tendency to have a desire to overeat, regardless of the physical cues that I'm being given. And I think about a lot of the amateurs out there and a lot of people coming new to the space that are coming off these horrible diets. There's going to be a real lag time between when you can really rely on your body and your satiety, and it does come. I'm definitely a lot closer than I ever was before. So my concern is one of the tools that helped me when I got off track was tracking.
Mhm.
And I don't think that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater and give up on the concept of tracking, not constantly and not obsessing, just like with the scale. But if we don't have an alternative to just using satiety, it's going to be difficult for a lot of people to stay on track.
Right.
And I like the idea. I think where you guys were going was with Bronson was a little bit more to like, certainly let's track your macros, get your protein,
Mhm.
and then get your fat, and don't worry about the calories. And then you can adjust those two things if you need to. But chances are, what are you going to use to do that? You're going to use one of these traditional, Lose It or MyFitnessPal or something,
Mhm.
and you're going to track your macros and your calories.
Right.
Okay. So I think a great message is to say, okay, but let's just forget about the calorie number. Let's focus on the macros, and then we can make
Mhm.
adjustments that way. But I just worry about, I think what people hear is you don't have to worry, you can eat as much as you want.
Yeah.
That psychological message, they skip over that tracking and limiting, and Baker, just to put an exclamation point on it, he summed it up most brilliantly. He says, if I eat 4 pounds of ribeye, I'm going to weigh more than if I eat 2 pounds of ribeye every day.
Mhm.
And it's the idea that we skip straight from calories or junk to the message that people put in their head is, oh, I can eat whatever I want,
Right.
and that's a problem.
Oh,
So
100%.
what's your thought on that?
Well, first of all, Bart, Bart has become, a friend of mine, and
Yeah, great guy, so smart.
we're the most opposite ends of the spectrum that have just kind of stumbled into each other and just get along great.
Yeah,
And he is brilliant, like crazy smart. I've learned a lot from him. And some of the stuff that I say, I do it more from a, I've been doing this in the trenches. Here's my experience. This is what works. And what he would agree with me is what you have experienced in the trenches is right from a scientific standpoint as far as he is concerned. That's why we get along so well. I'm not going to say I do everything Bart recommends, and Bart's certainly not going to do everything I recommend. You know, Bart is very set in his ways with you do 8 reps and no more. You do 2 sets and not 3. So that we agree on the premise of strength training, but I am very nuanced with the directions that I take it. Whether he agrees with it or not, it works for me and it works with others. Bart would also tell you, and he has talked about this in recent videos, that for him, it's a mass thing. So I would assume that if he's working with someone, he's going to say this much meat, this much or whatever at the volume at this meal. Now that is admittedly tough to do with a client. And especially when you have, you know, on my coaching platform online, I have nearly 100 people doing various different programs that I offer. So with my gold clients and my platinum clients that I work with, you know, yes, it is easier to use a caloric tracker, if you will. And that's the way I set it on my app. But how we arrive to it is what's important. So yes, calories, if you're listening, people out there, are crazy inaccurate. In terms of accuracy, they are not accurate. So we have to take them precisely as a measurement tool once you determine the volume of food that works best for you and the right foods off a food list. That's important because when I give my food list, if it's carnivore, it's going to be all the meats, obviously, which are fine. And I'm going to tell you, it's hard to get fat just eating meat. It is, unless you're an outlier that just can't shut off, you know,
it's hard to overeat those things.
It is very, very hard to overeat it. However, it's not hard to overeat cheese. It's not hard to overeat some dairy.
Definitely.
It's not, you know, and if I say to someone, I'm not going to be a zealot, you know, I'm not going to tell you can never have another raspberry the rest of your life. I'm not going to tell you that you can't have some chopped onions in your ground beef if that's your thing. And I only said that because I love onions. You could put them on a flip-flop and I'd eat them. But understand that the psychology and this temptation culture that we live in, if I say, listen, I understand, I'm never going to tell you can never eat raspberries again. Well, there may be some day that this poor soul goes to the supermarket and buys a steamer trunk full of freaking fruit and sits there and gorges themselves on it and turns into Paul Saladino 3.0. That's not a good thing. Okay. Right. So I have to take it in stages. So step 1, for everybody who wants to hear this, how does Rob do it? I set your protein, rough protein first. So generally, depending on what your current body composition is, that's going to be somewhere between 1 and 1.25 grams of protein per pound of, most cases, goal body weight. If you're already relatively lean, I might use current body weight, and that's also if you're very active in the gym, if you're an active person. Once we determine or find your intake of protein, then I'm going to shift your effective energy from fat up to where we land somewhere in that area of 60% fat, 40% protein, give or take to the individual. Let's use Bart K as an example again. He always says a 66-33. Okay, maybe that's his sweet spot. Maybe that's the sweet spot for most. Yep. For me, I do better on 60-40 in that range. Some days I'm 66-33. Some days I'm 56-42, but that's sort of the range that I'm in. And I'm right there with you. I do very, very well on that. So I'll set the protein. I'll bring the fat up to where we get to that 60-40 range and eat these foods on this list. And then my clients start tracking. And what can I do at any point? I can pull up my app and I can spy on my client and I can say, okay, here's how many calories we're at into the day. And then I look over to the left and I see everything that they've put down their neck that they've consumed. And if I look over there and I see things that are highly suspect that aren't on the list, I'm going to call them out. And if at the end of the day, things aren't clicking and I look at their macros and we've like sort of went off into the weeds, we're off of that 60-40 range, you know, roughly, things are kind of going haywire. I've set this amount of protein and my app is going to say, Jane Doe has underconsumed protein by 26%. I'll be like, shit, that's a lot. Hey, Jane, are you okay? Did you skip a meal or or where are we at? So yeah, it's a chess match that's constantly working in real time. So I'm not the kind of coach that's going to say, I will consult with you. I will dub you this many calories, this much protein, this much fat. Now be gone. Enjoy a successful life. Never to see you again. Or I'm not one of these assholes that wears a lab coat on YouTube and has no real clinical experience whatsoever. They just learn shit. And now they're just regurgitating said learned shit and convincing everybody that there's some new guru when they don't have a freaking clue because they haven't went to war with these people on the workout floor or behind a desk really digging through. Like if I sat down with someone in real time to talk about diet, it would look like we were doing 12 years of taxes together. We would be like punching numbers and doing this and talking and tell me where you're at and what the hell's going on and express this to me. And it may end up them lying on the couch crying about their mother didn't love them and they ate too many cookies. Who the hell knows where we're going with this? But that's the real world. That's real life. That's human beings. So you have to dig into all of that shit. So yeah, I still use calories. Sorry, Bart. I love you, brother. And I'm going to be on the show next week, by the way. So stay tuned for that. That should be good. So that's where I approach it. So absolutely, as long as you don't, if you're one of these, it's calories in and calories out, and that's the only thing that matters, correct, then we shouldn't work together because you're a fucking idiot. Okay. Right. I'm sorry. And I used to believe that. And I've been associated with people in my own social media circles that believed that. And I kind of let that shit go. And then over time, I realized, you know what? I knew they weren't completely accurate. I knew that hormones or being hormonally broken played a huge key in this. It's not just how much you eat or how much you don't eat. And if you do get into too deep of a deficit, you're going to completely screw up your hormones and you're going to slow your metabolism. You're going to shut everything down and then you're in real trouble. And then you're trying to claw your way out of that shit for the next 8 to 15 months. So yeah, just to say, and I see people bring up the stupid Twinkie guy that he ate less, energy and Twinkies than he should have consumed, right, and he lost weight. Go kill yourself. Okay. I don't want to, don't you bring, because that person, if he continued on with his stupid ass Twinkie diet, if that's the only thing you're going to follow, let me follow that guy for the next 5 years and find out what a complete freaking train wreck he is if he even makes it that long. So much more variables. We have to be well nourished. We have to find a deficit of energy that gets you burning an acceptable level of body fat without tanking your hormones and making you feel like utter dog shit. One thing that I did learn through bodybuilding, I learned a lot of very positive things, but I learned a few negative things too. And I'm thinking about doing a show that says bodybuilding almost killed me. And that's kind of a clickbait, but there were times in 2021, I got so deep in a deficit because I was trying to win. And I did get down to 4.5% body fat for those shows in 2021. But I was dying. And I'm not exaggerating, brother. I was fucking dying. I was a candidate to be taken to the emergency room. When I was driving to Pittsburgh to go to nationals, I was living off of 1,100 calories from whitefish and egg whites only. I was delirious. I was delusional. I was nauseous. I was weak. I didn't know where I was. I don't even remember the car ride up there. I remember being backstage after the prejudging. I didn't even know where I was. I went back to the bed, the Airbnb, to just sort of chill before we went back to the evening show. It took my wife 20 minutes to wake me up just to go back.
You sound like David Goggins after a 100-mile race.
That's the way I felt. And because a ridiculously deep caloric deficit. There's nothing healthy about bodybuilding at that level. There's not. I did that to achieve a goal to win a prize on stage. You're going to tell me boxers are healthy? You're going to tell me MMA fighters are always healthy? They're getting the shit kicked out of them all the time. They do extreme things to make weight. But that's why I said, listen, I did this for almost 10 years. I won my class several times. I made it to nationals. I did things in this sport that many people will never do. I'll take it, but now I'm done. I cannot continue to do this to my body. Now it's time to focus on longevity, focus on health, and be there for my wife and my daughter and my kids and my grandson and for my clients who put their faith in me. So that's where I am now. So I don't apologize for that. When people say, oh, you're not as big as you were 2 years ago. Well, no shit. I'm not I'm not doing everything in my power every second of the day to maximize muscle and take in 5,000 calories and eat every 2 hours and take in 300 grams of protein. And, that's not me anymore. I want to be present for my family. So I don't know what took me down that damn road, but, calories.
Yeah.
So yeah,
What I wanted to
I
hear,
agree with you. I agree with you.
yeah, what I wanted to hear was somebody with credibility, which you just did for me, say that calories not being an accurate thing to monitor does not mean you can eat as much as you want.
Oh, 100%.
Right. And does it mean that you never have to track? It's great to
Oh
be on a carnivore
no.
diet and not
Oh,
track if that's a convenience thing. But if you're trying to achieve
yeah,
some goals, you can't throw again the baby out with the bathwater
100%.
and say tracking doesn't matter and you can eat as much as you want.
I was
It
talking
just so there's better things to focus on than the caloric form of measurement.
Well,
That's the main
of course,
message.
I was doing a consult 2 days ago with this fantastic guy in England, and he's a lean guy. But he's trying to put on some muscle, and he's thinking about doing a men's physique show next year. And of course, we talked about you have to do this in periodized throughout the year in certain phases, and you have to keep track of this, and you have to keep track of that. We have to go through this build phase, and we have to do this, and slowly titrate down. We do this at 24 weeks. We're going to do this at 16 weeks. Da 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 da. And there is some tracking involved, and I'm going to help you set your macros. It's going to be this much fat, this much protein. We're not just grabbing a sack of jerky in a pouch and throwing a spear on our back and walking off onto the wilderness to go hunting and hope to God we come back and can feed our family. If that's the way life was for all of us 100%, then things would be very, very different.
Sure.
It'd also be
sure.
very, very hard to be fat in that environment. But now we live in this temptation culture where you can't go to fucking Home Depot without having to look at a sea of candy bars at the checkout counter. I'm just trying to buy a screwdriver, for God's sake. And then that's where we are in this culture. No wonder everybody's fat, broken, and diseased. And they want to keep you behind screens. They want to keep you under fluorescent lights, out of sunlight. They want you putting environmental toxins all over your body and just poisoning yourself and polluting yourself. And then if you're masculine, you're wrong. And if you're not woke, you suck and we're going to cancel you and, put on the freaking metaverse Now I'm just getting pissed off. Okay, I'll stop.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if we started, I already know that we're on the same page when it comes to everything away from bodybuilding. So we'll save that for another day. But I think that now ultimately, I think it's great to be where I'm pretty close to being and where you are, where we don't have to really track anymore. We don't have to. We've gotten the results we want.
Right,
Now we're
100%.
just looking to maintain a certain body and a certain lifestyle. And that is a goal to get there. But until you get there,
oh, for sure,
we shouldn't be throwing that stuff out.
Accountability, whatever level of accountability you need to assume to be successful. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. If you find a system, whether it be tracking, whether it be counting, whether it be whatever, if you said, this works for me, and when I'm doing this, I am losing body fat, I feel great, I perform great, my blood works great, don't change it. I haven't posted it yet, but speaking of Instagram, last night, I always talk about this handful of vegetables that I do occasionally consume. And one of them being my wife's butter, garlic, cabbage, right?
Renee's dying to eat some of that. So
guess what we had last night? She made all this beautiful free range pork, and then it got laid on what? A bed of her ridiculous garlic butter cabbage. And then she made this ridiculously clean cream sauce that went on top of it. I took a picture. I'm gonna post it on Instagram today. If you don't follow me on Instagram, do that. And my whole point of that is, the way I keep beating this topic like a dead horse, is if on occasion you have a bowl of cabbage or some cauliflower or an onion or some blueberries, and it doesn't keep you from your goal and you feel great and everything's going along, then do it. I'm not going to tell you to change. So if you're tracking and you're counting and you're doing this and you're okay with it and you're still living your life and you're not obsessed and everything is moving in the direction that you want it to move, why would I tell you to change? Why? And like the story I tell about coffee, if this poor woman, the only damn thing she's having that you could even remotely qualify as a potential health deterrent is a cup of freaking coffee, girlfriend, pour a second cup and I'll have one with you because you're doing a great job, and keep going.
We're still drinking our coffee. And you know what? We go out to dinner for a nice dinner 2 or 3 times a month. And instead of getting that baked potato or the fries or whatever,
Mhm.
we have them swap out a side salad or a helping of broccoli. And guess what? We eat it.
And you're still
We're going to
alive.
have our carnivore cards taken away from us.
Well, I don't know
It's
who's issuing
ridiculous.
these cards, but we need to hire somebody else for that job
Yeah.
because
And
yeah,
well, one last exclamation point on that topic, though, too, is this thing that I'm totally on board with you with, and that's the exogenous fat and adding that in. And right now, there's another one of these trends, and I think people are hearing what they want to hear, and it's with this butter munching.
yeah,
And the message, the initial message was that I think mainly for females, for certain hormonal reasons,
yeah,
it's better to have a higher fat ratio.
I
And
agree.
here's one of the ways you can do that is you can eat more butter. Guess what they hear, and guess what it turns into? I can just start chowing down on butter on top of what my normal input is.
And how
And then
many
they can't figure out why they're not making progress.
how many women are just going to? Uh, it's been a long time since I.
You
It's
feel
been a
the same way
long.
as me, I can tell by that face.
It's been a long time since I told this story, and I'll try to make it as brief as possible. And the story resonated so much, I still have people regurgitating this one line that I'll tell you at the end.
Can't wait.
I was in. This was back when I was very keto, my keto, real keto, not like butter chugging keto.
Right.
And that's how I got into this space is people would come to me and ask me to fix their ketogenic diets. How would you do this with hard training? Da, da, da. And I was in one of these ketogenic Facebook groups. I've got one. There's nothing wrong with that. But
Yep.
this one was extremely dogmatic and it was huge. It had like 100 and some thousand members. And this woman did a post, and the guy that runs, I'm not going to mention any names, but the guy that runs the group, he's the sole admin. He's profiting off of it. He sells programs and stuff and products and all this exogenous ketone horse shit. But this poor woman was saying that, okay, I have a problem. Some days I'm so busy, I have a hard time reaching my fat goal. I'm not having really any trouble with my protein goal, and I reach my 20-gram carb limit fairly easily, but sometimes I miss my fat goal, and I'm just not a huge fan of super, super fatty meats. What would you suggest that I do? And he chimed in immediately, and he said, listen, if you don't hit your fat goal every single day, as I have prescribed, you're not going to get results. And what I want you to do is, even if it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night, if you find that you haven't reached your fat goal, here's what you do. You just literally go out to the kitchen, grab a stick or two of butter, and just sit there at the kitchen sink and eat that butter and calculate how much you're eating until you come up to the calculation where you have reached your fat goal. And I almost slit my wrists over that one. Number one, if this poor woman is trying to burn body fat, if on a particular day or two she doesn't quite reach her fat goal, that's okay. My advice to Sally would be, hey, go to bed. You're good. Okay. You're doing just fine. And in fact, maybe while you're sleeping tonight, you'll burn some body fat and, you get yourself further to your goal. And then I often joke to people, I'll say, number one, don't eat butter at the kitchen sink. And people will come to me every once in a while and say, hey, I didn't eat any butter at the kitchen sink. They remember that story. And then I'll also ask people, listen, fat is important and it's a wonderful macronutrient and we do need it, but massive in excess just doesn't make sense all the time, especially for people trying to lose body fat, because what would you rather burn? The stick of butter in your coffee or the fat on your ass? I've never had anybody not say ass fat. Never. They always say ass fat. I want to burn the ass fat. They don't say, well, I want to burn the butter. No, you want to burn the ass fat. And maybe if you're a leaner person, then you can tolerate a little bit more fat or whatever the goal may be, or wherever you are hormonally, it all comes into play and we're all different. But to tell this poor woman, here's what I want you to do, Jessica. I want you to go eat 2 sticks of butter at the kitchen sink at 11 o'clock at night before you go to bed. How sustainable is that? What a ridiculous thing to recommend a human being to do.
Let alone a bad habit if you start to like it.
It's just ridiculous. That is a cult. That is a cult. That is not a way of eating to sustain and develop good health and body composition. That is a cult. And you need to run away from that cult right now and find somebody who is rational and practical and reasonable, that is willing to work with you in real time and uncover what you need that's best for you to make you fit, healthy, and drop some body fat. So don't eat butter to the kitchen sink.
Thank you, Rob Goodwin, for giving me some credibility with that
You know what?
statement. Because
I thought I was going to just interview this friend of mine, and but now you got me all pissed off. You got me sweating. It was like, let me at him. So I don't
your
know.
hot buttons are my hot buttons, buddy. That's what it is.
So this
But
is yeah,
it's been great, and I would ask for one last thing on the way out, and
sure.
that is for those that guy. I'm asking for a friend that's maybe just a few percentage points away from his body fat goal. What's a couple quick tips? I
Don't
want
eat
us to
as
go from
much.
16 to 12 because I want to be where you are and stay there, 10 to 12.
You use your fat macros as a lever, and maybe reduce that effective energy intake a tad.
More
Not
protein, less
not too
fat.
much. I would, whenever, listen, if I'm trying to get shredded, let's use the terms. If I'm trying to get freaking ripped, I'm trying to be that guy with 8-pack abs on the beach that everybody goes, holy shit, look at that freaking ripped old guy over there. Then
Mhm.
I'm going to up my protein a little bit. I'm going to lower my fat a little bit. I'm going to bring all that effective energy down a little bit. And
Bingo.
I'm gonna go, a week or two, and if I see a consistent, steady drop in body fat, and I'm looking better in the mirror and better in the mirror and better in the mirror, then I'm going to keep going that path. If I make that adjustment and nothing happens over 4 weeks, then I'm going to lower it a little bit again. It's called a cut. You can call it a protein sparing modified fast. Just don't do it
Right.
too long. And you don't need to go to these obscenely low levels that some of these people recommend with these protein sparing modified fasts or these deep cuts, because then you run into the getting hormonal issues, and then digging yourself out of that could take months if by already laying that damage down. So yeah,
Listen, at my age, 12 for life would be a dream.
if you
That's my goal.
if you can be 10 to 12% body fat through all of the summer months, and maybe 12 to 14% in the winter months, you're in the damn 1%, dude.
Yeah.
You're there. You're the freak in the room. You're the outlier, and that's what we want to be. And that's really what it is. So of course, when I'm coming into summertime, I'm training hard. I am doing a little bit more cardio because I like to. And for me, it's about conditioning. It's not about getting lean.
The
So
rucking gets addicting.
I love it. I absolutely love rucking. But I bring that energy down a little bit. I might up the protein a little bit, maybe a few leaner cuts of meat here and there, and then I just make those little micro adjustments, and I keep track of how the progress is going. And if everything is slowly coming off, maybe a pound or two a week, no more. There it is. That's what you want to do.
Exactly my strategy. I'm glad to hear it because I'm going from 65-35 generally, and I'm just tweaking it a little bit in the protein direction from there.
Yes, like if I was going 65-35 and everything was steady Eddie, then I would maybe go to 60-40, and then maybe even, have some weekly periodization where on certain days I have more of a high protein day, and then other days I balance it back up. Or, I've worked with clients where I did a 5-2, where 5 days a week is more traditional carnivore, 60-40. And then on the weekends, we may bump up the protein a little bit, bring down the fat a little bit. And these little strategies work. So you find what works best for you.
Renee is currently trying a PSMF on like Monday and Wednesday, and then sticking to her regular macros the rest of the week, and just seeing what happens.
There's nothing wrong with that. And the thing, some people don't do well with that as much. So some people do well on doing like a 24-hour fast once a week. Mm-hmm. You're still taking in less effective energy. You're letting your body sort of recover a little bit. You rest your central nervous system, your digestive tract, all these things. Everybody's different, man.
Well, that's our problem. We like to eat.
I love to eat too. I said earlier, I was a hyper responder with putting on muscle, but I also get fat easy if I overeat. So that's the cross I have to bear. So where I benefited genetically being able to put on muscle, I didn't benefit in the fact that if I go over what my body perceives as my maintenance of intake, I get fat fast, dude. It starts to pack on. So I eat big. So I either have to eat big clean or I eat big shitty. So I have to pick the clean route or else I'm going to blow up. So that's another reason why carnivore works so well for me, because I don't really get hungry. I feel satisfied all the time. I'm not going to overeat. I mean, when's the last time you had a ribeye and said, I think I'll have another one? You eat the ribeye and you move on. You're good. Yep. And that's what's great about that. But some people, if they see my food list, they'll see on there a little bit of aged cheese. And I always make the caveat, do good, healthy dairy if you can tolerate it and if it doesn't lead to a binge. You know, there are people out there that if they have one slice of cheese, then they're going to have another one and another one and another one. And then I'll also tell
Cheese is
people,
my kryptonite. That's why I don't eat it
yeah.
anymore. Because
So I
again, I
also,
can eat a block of cheddar cheese in no time.
and that's another reason why you have to give people, you know, you have to give them a visual. I'll say use cheese as a condiment, not as a whole food.
Right.
So
Right.
grate a little bit on top of your steak, grate a little bit on top of this or on top of that, and don't rely on it as a standalone, you know, food source. And you're probably going to be a lot better off. And that works for a lot of people. So it's just about finding what works best for you. But once again, man, we live in the most insane temptation culture of all time to navigate this earth and not, you know, cheat, because we're constantly being barraged with it everywhere we go. And then even people, you know, our circle, our coworkers, our family, they want to, they don't even realize they're doing it, but they want to bring you down to their level because it justifies their laziness and they don't feel as
So
guilty.
wonderful though. Once you get past a point, it's not a temptation anymore. Like you, when in your two clients that you described in the most recent video, it's that way at the beginning, but at the end, we don't even have problems eating out and everything. We know what to order. It's not a
No,
big deal.
I don't have a
And
problem.
I want to also put one last plug in for eating carnivore on the cheap, because I got my 10-pound log of 73.27 at Walmart yesterday, ground beef, and
Mhm.
I got a box of 60 eggs for $9.19, which is about 16 cents an egg. I wish I had chickens,
Yeah, I
but I
love my
live in an
chickens.
apartment, so that's not happening. But you know what? Grass fed is great, but you got to do what you can afford, buy the best that you can afford,
Absolutely.
and you're still
100%.
going to be doing so much better than the standard American diet. It's beyond belief. We feel great, and we eat carnivore on the cheap.
If you can get grass fed, do it. If you can get pastured eggs, do it. If you can't, don't let that be the reason why you don't go carnivore. That's
Right.
crazy. You're still
Crazy.
going to be hugely better off by eating just the supermarket ground beef, the
Yeah.
supermarket eggs, 1,000 times better than just any kind of a Western diet or, you know,
Yeah.
any of that stuff, or especially a vegan diet, which is just going to destroy you, as we know.
We
So
don't even have to go down that road.
no, that's a
But
whole nother discussion. But anyway,
I know I've taken a lot of your time, Rob, so we can
how did
finish it
this
there if
turn
you'd
into
like. But
you interviewing me?
hey,
What the hell? I thought I was going
yeah,
to be able to relax.
I do have some talents from my previous career. I can tell you that
You're
when it
an
comes to
yeah,
interviewing.
you're an interrogator. That's where this is going. I'm going to go home. My wife's going to be, why are you sweaty? I'm like, I had an interview. I'm like,
Yeah, somebody pushed my
did it go
buttons.
bad? Did it go wrong? I'm like, no, it was great. But I, you know, but yeah, I'll put it into context of who you were. And she'll be like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense then. So I think I need to go
Well,
on a hard ruck right now because now you got me all fired up. I think my blood pressure is a little high right now. So
I really appreciate you having me, and I enjoyed it, and I sincerely hope that we offered your followers something that they get
dude,
something out of.
this was so much fun. I forgot. Yeah, we're doing this for other people. How cool is that? I
Yeah,
was selfishly thinking, hey, I'm having a blast right now just
yeah.
talking to you. We got to
Well,
do
that's
this
me.
again. We got to do this again.
Absolutely,
But I hope you'll come
absolutely,
back. I hope
for
you'll be there
sure, for sure.
because, you know, don't make me track you down. That's not what I,
Anytime.
but that's not what I do. That's what you do.
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
right.
brother. Again, it was a sincere honor and privilege.
Thank you, sir.
Man, what a
Likewise.
blast. We're talking about high intensity training, talking about carnivore, making fun of the damn zealots. It can't get any
Hmm.
better than that, right?
You got it.
All right,
Yeah.
everybody. If you
My
made it
brother
this
from another
far,
mother.
there exactly. If you made it this far, people watching this, you're a freak. Good job. You're lucky because you learned some shit. You should be motivated. Go to his Instagram, follow Carnivore Cabal. I love that channel. Follow
Thanks.
him on YouTube, wherever he may wind up. I'll make sure you're aware of it. And leave a comment, hit the subscribe button, all that good shit on both my channel and his channel, and help us spread this message to people out there that need to hear it, to more like-minded individuals that really might value some of this crazy content that you and I are putting out. Thank you again so much, Steve. Carnivore Cabal,
Thank you,
Chief
sir.
Kabbalist, here on the show. It was a real honor, man. Let's do this again sometime, okay?
Definitely. Thanks,
All
bud.
right, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.